You guys probably know a bunch of the stuff that we're going to talk about, but some of it might be new, or maybe there's more detail. Some of you might be able to say more about it. I have purposely made it a little bit short and a little bit general, just as a taste right now, and then we'll go on to the other half of the program. So let's get the official slideshow view going. I couldn't resist. I really like that font, but I think it's actually a pretty terrible font for a slideshow. It's a little hard to read. But there we go. Yes, yeah, right? Oh dear. Okay. So hopefully we'll see a little more snow this year, but we'll find out. So in the winter here, there's some species that we only see here at this time of the year. And there's some examples here. This little sparrow with the black and white stripes on its head. Just say the name for those of you who remember. A+, white-crowned sparrow. So they are only here in the winter, just like the sandhill cranes. And they're a really common feeder bird, and they sing in the winter, which a lot of birds don't sing. So you hear this song going on and on. I don't have it to play it now, but if you look up white-crowned sparrow on one of the internet guides to birds, they have songs that you can play, and you can hear what that sounds like, and your brain will say, oh yeah, I hear that all the time in Albuquerque in wintertime. So that's one of our specialties for winter. Less frequently seen, of course, is the bald eagle, also here for the winter only. And they're, what can I say, spectacular. They're so exciting every time you see one. And they usually stay close to the river. They'll often be perching someplace. If you're at a distance across the river from where there's one perching, it's really easy to spot them, at least if they're an adult with the white head and the white tail. If they're overhead, sometimes you don't notice them when they're in the trees above you and they aren't talking, so you can miss them. But certainly when they fly over, even at a great height, if it's an adult bird like this one with the white head and the white tail, you'll know you're looking at a bald eagle. And even if you don't see a white head and a white tail, if you've had a little experience looking at raptors or birds of prey that are flying over, these guys are massive. And their wings, they keep their wings out like this instead of like this, like a turkey vulture, or a little bit less like that, like some of the other big hawks. So if you see a really massive dark bird with long wings compared to the rest of its body, and all black or white and black in that pattern, then you know you've got a bald eagle in the winter. Are they nesting in the winter when they're here? No, they are not. They are not nesting. We do have some raptors, that is the owls, that are nesting starting in the winter, but the eagles are not nesting here in winter. They're elsewhere nesting. And then the little duck at the bottom there, there's most of the ducks that we get here in winter are not seen in the summertime here. And some of them are only seen during migration. So cinnamon teal, the little small cinnamony color the male is, those are really frequently seen in the fall and sometimes in the spring, but generally not in the winter or in the summer. But we might see them at other times. But this is one, for example, this one is called anybody know it? Common golden eye. There's a few ducks that have that yellow, bright yellow eye, but this is one of them, and it's named for that. And if you're thinking ducks, if you look at where the white is on the bird, it's a lot easier at a distance to see a duck and see sort of dark and light than it is to see specific features. And so between the shape and looking at dark and light, that can help you know some more about your ducks. But this one is one that we generally, if we see it, we only see it in the winter, the common goldeneye. If you've ever spent any time up in the little town, okay, so on the way to Taos, you're going through the area where people raft, and there is a turnoff where you can go, Pilar, thank you, Pilar. So when you go on that little turnoff towards Pilar, or at Pilar, then there's a little section of the river that has golden eyes in it, and a bunch of them. And so it's kind of fun to see that. We only ever see one or two here. So, okay, so species only observed in winter. And I'm sure you could probably think of some others, like sandhill cranes, for example, but let's go ahead on. And then there's some species that are more easy to observe in winter, like our porcupines. Of course, once you have seen one, you can kind of see them anytime, but certainly without the leaves, they're a lot easier to observe. One of our visitors took this picture and a bunch of videos and sent it to Heather. Oh my goodness, the videos are hilarious. So we're trying to see if we can get that out there a little bit. We'll find out, but yeah, gorgeous porcupine with a serious like mohawk hairdo this guy's got. And one of the things that they're doing along with other animals in the winter is they're eating the buds on the trees. So of course the trees look like they're dead. We all know they're not dead. But if you haven't ever looked closely at tree and shrub branches in the winter, look closely. On the ends of the branches and on a couple spots on either side of the branches, there's little buds coming out. And they're already producing buds over the winter. And that's one of the things that porcupines might be eating in winter along with other species of animal. Like when you see in the woods, in the mountains, you see deer browsing maybe in winter, they're eating the fresh part of the branches on the tree. All right, and then this guy, some of you might not know him, especially half out of the water, but this one is, anybody? American coot. And the American coot we have year-round, but in the winter, they're out on the ice when we have ice. And then you can see their amazing, amazing feet, which is not a great view from here. But instead of webbed feet like a duck, they're not a duck. They have lobed feet. So they have sort of little, like if there was a letter B on either side of their toe, they have that on each toe. And their feet are really big, which in warm weather helps them walk in the mud. In cold weather helps them walk on the ice. And they're just as hilarious as the ducks on the ice, maybe more so. But anyway, so you get to see things that you don't see even on some species that you see at other times. All right. Anybody have any thoughts on other species that you might just be able to get a better look at? Or Gulls, yeah, because they're here in the wintertime. So if you go up to Alameda, sometimes we see them flying over here, but in the winter there's usually a few hundred ring-billed gulls and occasionally some other gulls as well. Very easy. And they're sometimes here in warmer weather, but mostly just in the winter. Whoops. Okay. So, how to survive in the cold? First off, don't sit around. Be active. So if you guys have seen chickadees, the smaller bird, the front bird here at the bottom, or robins, the robin redbreast up there on the side, you know that in the winter they're just like constantly eating, constantly moving around. And that helps them maintain their warmth and their energy. And that goes for some plants. Some plants are active in the winter as well. So the evergreens in temperate climates are still, of course they don't have water running through them in great quantities like they would in the warm weather, but they're still maintaining a little bit of photosynthesis in the winter. They're still a little bit active, and so they have the green going on. And we've got the chickadee sitting on some kind of pine, and I'm not sure what that is in the background behind the bluebirds. I'm sure you can't tell that they're bluebirds, but there's about 10 bluebirds squished together in that spot. And that's another thing that animals do when it's cold, including us, is huddle together to stay warm. And then insulation. So birds have feathers that are special for helping insulate, but they sometimes grow more feathers in the winter. And there are, of course, mammals that always have extra fur for special occasions like winter. and some that just grow some extra fur. So there's animals that we know that lose fur in the spring because the winter coat is going away. And just like we have our winter coats, they have their winter coats also. And I think I had something else I was going to mention here, so quick notes. Quick look at the notes. Okay. Yeah, that is that on that page. Okay, so staying active and other ways to stay warm. Sorry, this little, my hand is like the wrong way for the little clicker here. Okay, circulation. So some of us have complained about not having great circulation in our feet, and therefore they're cold in the wintertime. And that is an issue for other animals as well, I'm sure. But many animals and plants have a higher level of sugars or glycol in their blood or sap, as the case may be, that helps them maintain not good circulation, but not get as cold, right? So if it was water, the water would freeze, and the frozen water could damage their tissues, which happens to us when we get frostbite. So they have more sugars in the blood, and that keeps it from getting as cold as fast. In particular, ducks and geese, like this snow geese here, they have a special situation where they have a great entanglement of veins and arteries, and they're running next to each other. And so the arteries that are bringing the warm blood are next to the veins that are taking the cold blood, and they help heat up that blood. Am I saying water when I'm trying to say blood? Sorry. Anyway, so that helps them keep their feet warm. It's a little bit of a cycle that keeps the heat in their feet, but not in the regular way. Another thing that some animals have, which is hard to see, but that's our morning cloak butterfly, and I'm sure many of you have seen one in February. As adults, they stay over the winter, and it's not called hibernation, but we'll get to that. But they have this thing, they have the same kind of thing going on. They have a higher level of glycol in their system, and so they are able to maintain the flow without freezing. And it's amazing. I mean, you think, like, it's one thing to think about a bear staying over the winter, but a little tiny butterfly, but they do. They're able to do it. And they're the first butterfly we see, usually in February, sometimes even in January on a warm day. We'll see a morning cloak butterfly. And then I mentioned the trees, so here's a pinon pine that's also got sap that's running through it. Like most trees have the sap, and the sap becomes, most trees have the sap. The trees have sap, and the sap becomes, again, has more glycol in it. And so the tissues aren't freezing, and they're able to maintain some of that circulation. Let me just take a peek at this. Oh, and that photo of the butterfly was taken in the Sacramento Mountains in January of last year. In January, imagine. Okay, it is the Sacramento Mountains, but still. So another strategy is sleeping the winter away, which some of us would like to do. Generally speaking, what we call it when animals and plants are not as active is dormancy. And there's different varieties of dormancy that happen, but basically what it means is that the body's metabolism, both the management of food resources and energy, but also oxygen, waste, and other parts of the systems are going at a really slow rate. The word torpor usually is used to describe a temporary situation. So hummingbird that's caught off guard in the winter is still around. It will go into what's called torpor overnight. and it appears dead. If you were to pick it up and hold it, which you wouldn't do, but you could think it's dead. But actually it's just slowed down all its systems, it's conserving its energy, and it's able to breathe, so to speak, at this very low level. It has what it needs in its body overnight, and then in the morning it warms up and it's able to come back to life, as it were. It's not quite like cryogenics or anything. It's just slowing down the metabolism a little bit. And many animals in all different categories will go through torpor of some kind. So going back to dormancy, plants are, we don't talk about plants and say, oh, they're going through hibernation. But the plants that are not active in winter, all of the deciduous trees, are in a state of dormancy, right? So that's the word we use for plants. And torpor, we talked about that. Torpor could be just overnight, or it could be a few weeks, but it's not like this long-term thing like bears go through, for example. And then, of course, there's hibernation. This adorable creature is I forget, you can't see the arrow. Up on the top left is an Arctic ground squirrel. We have ground squirrels. Our rock squirrels are ground squirrels, and they, I think they go through a hibernation that's known as facultative, which means they only do it when they're stressed, rather than obligatory, which means that it's part of their construction. They have to go through hibernation every winter. They can't decide to come in or out of it. So this guy goes into a hibernation that's really long, over the whole season that things are closed, and it's inactive for this huge amount of time, and they're really interesting animals. Research is being done on hibernation and these other forms of dormancy to think about human health and how people could maybe humans could be in dormancy of some kind to work on some kind of aspect of health if there's an injury or an illness. And that's kind of interesting to think about, not a natural part of our system. But and then I have this, I don't know if you guys can read it, but the next word on the list is brumation. And up at the tippy top in this little, I just saw this on Twitter this morning. Brumation is a state or condition of dormancy exhibited by reptiles and amphibians and fish, but it doesn't say that, in response to cold weather, and it's characterized by lethargy and a decreased metabolic activity. So they don't go into the same situation, and some of them go more deeply than others. So for example, frogs, they're less likely to go full on stay under the mud all the time. In fact, all the herps are. But frogs will stay in the upper reaches of the mud, maybe not even buried all the way. The aquatic turtles will go under the mud and bury themselves. And their metabolism through brumation is slowed down so much that they get all the oxygen they need through the water in the mud, through their skin. Kind of amazing. But most reptiles and amphibians will go underground, whether they're terrestrial or aquatic. Diapause, yeah.
So would the turtles come up if it's a warm day, or are they going to stay in?
Yeah, so most of the reptiles in this kind of a climate and amphibians will come out might come out, I should say, if it's a warm enough day. Because, thank you for saying that, because I forgot to say something more about brumation. Brumation is, it happens because these animals are ectothermic. They can't maintain heat and cold, heat the way that we do, right? They're what was used to be known as cold-blooded. And so their response to the environment is to find a way to cool off or warm up by moving into an area that's cooler or warmer. And so their strategy is to go under the mud, where it might not be warm, but it's going to be in the 50s. They can handle that, like under the ground, enough of a level below the ice. But they can't go into hibernation the way that mammals do. So this is what they have to do. And unlike in hibernation, they will come out of it on a regular basis. So again, the turtles, you know, if not right now because there is ice over the pond, but if there wasn't ice over the pond and it was a sunny, warm day, we'd probably have a few turtles come out. And if it was really, really a nice day, even in winter, some of you remember a Nature and Winter Festival, probably 2012 or so, I don't know what year it was, but it was like 75 degrees out, and we had a higher attendance and made more money than we ever did on any other festival because it was January, and not only were the turtles out, but all the humans were too. It's warm. And yeah, so on those warm days you might see them. Just like in the middle of winter sometimes, if you're walking in the foothills, the lizards will be out. And you're thinking, what? But in that little microclimate, it's warm and sunny enough that they are able to heat up enough to be active at that level. Part of the thing is that many of the reptiles and amphibians, not all obviously, but many reptiles and amphibians are insectivores, or at least partially are depending on insects. And of course the insects are doing the same thing, called a slightly different word, but they're also staying under the dirt or hidden in some way. And that's part of the reason as well. It's not what motivates them though. They do it because they're cold. Okay. Information. There we go. I mentioned that. Nope. Oh, I forgot a word. Estivation. No, I forgot two words. Diapause. Okay, so diapause is a word that gets used with arthropods mostly, and it's not a suspension of metabolism exactly. It's a suspension of development. So the arthropods are going through stages of development over the course of the year: egg, pupae, various levels of what do butterflies do? They go through... Thank you. I knew it was an M word, but I couldn't get it. Right, so various stages of development. And what happens with diapause is that due to conditions, they're able to basically hold off on completing a stage of development. Weird, huh? That's something I want to learn more about because that's very weird. But yeah, and so some invertebrates are able to stay in a certain stage of development maybe longer than they would otherwise due to the weather. And it can happen in any stage of the development. And then estivation. Estivation is basically hibernation that happens in the winter. So estivation isn't hibernation exactly, but if you think of the desert Southwest, it's too hot to do stuff in the summer. And so many animals will spend time over the course of the day or even longer. I think I have a picture of one on the next slide. Oh, I didn't put it there. I had a slide of a spadefoot toad, New Mexico spadefoot toad. So some animals will just go hide in the shade for the day and then they're active at night, for example. But some animals will actually go into a state of dormancy or torpor that gets called estivation in the summertime. And the more long-term version is what you see, say, with a New Mexico spadefoot toad. The toads are underground until it rains. It rains and they all pop up, do their mating, back underground until the next rain, right? So that's what estivation is. And I was happy to find that out because I used to think, as of a few days ago, that estivation was what reptiles and amphibians did. So forgive me if I told you wrong. Estivation is not that at all. Okay. And of course there's flight. And literal flight. Many species of bird migrate due to the weather and also to environmental considerations in terms of what is available to eat. So We have birds that you think, well, why don't they spend the whole season in the tropics? Why did they come up here? Well, there's less competition for nesting up here, so they're back and forth. So that's a different thing. That's not quite the same thing. But in response to cold, there are many species of birds that will travel great distances to escape the cold for the season, or go to a less cold place. And that's true for many other animals as well. And there's all kinds of animals that will migrate for various reasons, but there are many animals that will migrate as well for the reason of winter, for their metabolism. But birds are the most famous for that. Many of the other ones are migrating for other reasons.
What about mammals that go from high elevation in summer to low elevation in winter?
Yes, yeah, that's a form of migration, and there's probably a special name of it. Do you know? I don't know.
What you call that?
But yeah, that's another thing that happens. So hermit thrushes, we see them down here in the wintertime, and they're eating all the berries on all the trees and things and hanging out in the leaf litter underneath the shrubs. But they spend the summer up in the mountains. Again, because there's a vacancy for raising babies in the mountains that isn't there the rest of the time. So they have a space they can go to raise babies.